Coming up on Global Business, New Zealand Prime Minister Chris Hipkins concludes his official visit to China today, with both sides agreeing to strengthen high-level contacts and to reinforce cooperation. Recovery momentum. China's manufacturing PMI rises in June, with factories seeing expanding production activity and an improvement in new orders. And a EU summit is taking place with Eurozone inflation falling for a third straight month in June as food and fuel prices ease. Welcome everyone to Global Business here on CGTN. I'm Michael Wong in Beijing. Well, today is the last day of New Zealand Prime Minister Chris Hipkins' official visit to China. The visit has been successful in strengthening political and economic ties between the two countries and has resulted in several cooperation agreements. A joint statement was issued on Wednesday reaffirming New Zealand's commitment to its One China policy and welcoming China's application to join the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership. Now witnessed by Chinese Premier Li Qiang and Prime Minister Chris Hipkins, 7 cooperation documents were signed. The two countries have agreed to expand cooperation in areas such as climate change, in science and innovation, trade facilitation, and law enforcement. And during his 6-day trip to China, the New Zealand Prime Minister visited Beijing, Shanghai, and attended the Summer Davos in Tianjin. Well, over the past few years, trade between China and New Zealand has seen consistent growth. In the first quarter of 2023, New Zealand's exports of goods and services to China grew to 24 billion New Zealand dollars, or nearly 15 billion US dollars, rising 22% year on year. Now, the Chinese market has been instrumental in driving New Zealand's accelerated economic recovery. New Zealand has also been a strong supporter of China's regional development initiatives and was the first Western nation to sign a free trade agreement with the country back in 2008. In 2015, New Zealand became a founding member of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, again being one of the first Western countries to back China's regional development efforts. In 2017, the country made further strides by signing a memorandum of understanding with China on the Belt and Road Initiative. And just last year, an upgraded protocol on the free trade agreement between the two countries came into effect, further cementing their economic partnership. Well, New Zealand Prime Minister Chris Hipkins was in Shanghai with a team of business delegates on Thursday. The Shanghai stop aimed to boost diplomatic and business ties between the two nations, including in tourism. Our Chen Tong reports.
At a news briefing on Thursday afternoon, New Zealand Prime Minister Chris Hipkins said he's glad to see Chinese tourists back in his country after borders were closed due to COVID-19. Hipkins said the tourism sector is crucial to New Zealand's economy. As of the end of April, New Zealand had welcomed 77,000 Chinese tourists this year, with 40% of them visiting family and friends and 30% on vacation.
One of the main themes of my travel here to China is reconnection following the pandemic. We expect the number of visitors to New Zealand to continue to increase as international air connectivity continues to increase following the pandemic.
Before the pandemic, China was the second biggest international traveler market for New Zealand. The New Zealand government admits the recovery has been relatively slow, but the country expects to welcome between 150,000 to 200,000 Chinese travelers this year.
And we really want to tailor our products to what Chinese visitors are looking for. So free and independent travel, as well as sort of tailor-made smaller group travel, we see those as really growing trends, so we'll be using that in our marketing.
The New Zealand government has also announced a cooperation agreement with the leading Chinese social media platform in Shanghai, hoping to get more online exposure to boost the tourism sector. Shanghai is the last stop on New Zealand Prime Minister Chris Hipkins' China trip. And the first thing he did after arriving in the city was to promote New Zealand to Chinese tourists. This shows how determined he is to attract more Chinese nationals to New Zealand, with the aim of further boosting the local economy. Chen Tong, CGTN, Shanghai.
And for more on the New Zealand Prime Minister's visit to China, I want to bring in Li Yong, trade expert and chief researcher at DNC Think Tank. Mr. Li, many thanks for joining us on the program. So Prime Minister Hipkins had a relatively long visit to China, I would say. What did this visit mean for strengthening bilateral ties, and what stood out to you in terms of the outcomes achieved?
I think, first of all, it means a lot in terms of the bilateral relations. First of all, intergovernmental relations have been enhanced as a result of the meetings, official meetings with the Chinese high-level government officials, including President Xi Jinping, and of course, the reaffirmation of a set of principles underlying the bilateral relations is essential in terms of improving, in terms of enhancing the further development of the official relations. And secondly, I think it is very significant in terms of expanding the economic and trade ties. And the visit to other cities like Tianjin to attend the Davos conference, where the New Zealand Prime Minister made a speech, and he talked about the importance of some of the global issues and definitely cooperation with China. And in Shanghai, you can see his focus on promoting the business ties, and he attended quite a number of agreement signing ceremonies, and that shows his focus on further expanding mutually beneficial relations, economic trade relations. And what stood out to me, I think, is the 7 cooperation documents signed as a result of his visit, and I believe it is not going to be just the 7. There will be more such documents in the process of future coordination and cooperation. Back to you.
And Mr. Li, one of those bilateral cooperation agreements signed this time was the strategic plan on promoting agricultural cooperation between China and New Zealand. Given the Chinese consumers' growing demand for high-quality agricultural products, how do you see the potential of New Zealand further boosting what is already quite a robust agricultural relationship with China?
Yes, indeed. The agricultural cooperation between China and New Zealand has already been robust, but obviously we still have a lot of potentials that needs to be tapped on. And on the front end, it is not just about expanding the export of dairy products, for example, the export of other agricultural products. It also, I think, includes the other area of cooperation on the front end. For example, the sales and marketing and cooperation with local partners. And one of the examples of such cooperation is the agreement on the supply of milk to a Chinese ice cream company. So that is a demonstration of the front end cooperation, and then the back end, I think, it will include for example, R&D of agricultural products and the local cooperation. And there are already quite a lot of cooperation projects between China and the local governments. For example, in Jilin province, there are a number of cooperation going on. In Sichuan province, the same is true, and I believe there are many other cooperation projects and opportunities for the two countries to explore.
Absolutely.
Back to you.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Many thanks for your thoughts as always. Li Yong, chief researcher at DNC Think Tank. Thank you. China's fixed asset investment has shown considerable growth with the completion of water transport construction projects worth 73.4 billion yuan, or over $10 billion during the first 5 months of the year. According to China's Ministry of Transport, this marks an increase of more than 30% compared to the same period last year. Moreover, the country's port operations have also demonstrated steady growth, with Chinese ports handling almost 6.75 billion tons of cargo, an increase of nearly 8% annually during the same period. Additionally, container throughput has risen to 122 million units handled, indicating a year-on-year increase of nearly 5%. Well, fresh numbers from China's National Bureau of Statistics showed the country's Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index, or PMI, rose to 49 in June compared to 48.8 in May. Factory activity is improving with both the production and new orders sub-indexes rising, but the overall manufacturing PMI reading is still below the 50 mark that separates expansion from contraction. Meanwhile, the non-manufacturing PMI, which includes the construction and service industries, declined to 53.2 in June from 54.5 in May, and the composite PMI fell to 52.3 from 52.9 in May. Well, despite the decline, both readings are still firmly in expansion mode. China's Statistics Bureau says overall business activity continued to expand in June, showing a steady recovery of China's economy. Well, according to the World Robotics 2022 report released by the International Federation of Robotics, China's massive investment in industrial robots has now moved the country up in the global rankings of robot density, surpassing the United States for the first time. It also marks a significant improvement in the country's industrial automation capacities. Our reporter Zhang Xixuan has more.
Construction sites in the past have always been full of workers, busy in all kinds of weather and sometimes exposed to safety risks. But on some construction sites in China now, you can find these machines helping out. This plastering robot is applying a thin layer of mortar over the wall surface all by itself. In 8 hours, it can complete work on 460 square meters, a job that previously would have been assigned to 10 workers. Robots like this are changing the entire industry.
From 2019 to last year, the number of employees in our industry has dropped by from 700,000 to 1 million every year. But the number of construction companies has been rising, from 110,000 to 140,000 at the end of last year.
These robots have now finished work on 500,000 square meters of walls on Shanghai construction sites. They were all developed by the construction group itself, at its in-house engineering research institute.
Robots that work on construction sites are creating a new environment while they work, which means they have to be continuously updated to the new environment. That puts more requirements on algorithms and their adaptation. We need to work out smooth cooperation between humans and machines.
Shanghai's current robot density, a key gauge measuring the adoption of automation in manufacturing, is now already more than twice the global average. Not satisfied with that, the city aims to raise the density by another 100 robots per 10,000 persons in the following 3 years, an increase of almost 40% from now. But the question is, where will all the new robots come from and where will they go?
First is solar. 3 years ago, we had almost none reference in this field. And in recent years, our growth rates have all doubled and even tripled. There are lots of applications both in solar and EV batteries, such as assembly, screw driving, and material handling. The intensity of the robots in these two industries are very high compared to other segments.
The Swiss robotics giant opened a mega factory in Shanghai last December with an investment of $150 million. As one of the company's largest robotics factory worldwide, the new facility will further energize robotics growth.
While faster in production, our speed can be improved by 200%. We will unlock new possibilities for flexible automation in new and existing sectors: electronics, logistics, healthcare, new energy vehicles, e-commerce, pharmaceuticals, restaurants, and service robots.
Last year, the annual output of industrial robots in Shanghai accounted for 1/5 of China's total. By 2025, Shanghai is shooting to build 10 industry-leading robot brands and 100 demonstration application scenarios, with the scale of its robot-related industry reaching 100 billion yuan. Zhang Shixuan, ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
And a conference aimed at promoting this year's China International Import Expo was held in Seoul, South Korea. Top officials, diplomats, and business leaders from both sides attended the event. Our Su Min-yu reports.
Enthusiasm and expectations were high for trade revitalization at a conference here in Seoul to promote this year's China International Import Expo, or CIIE, as more companies were on the lookout for new opportunities. Many businesses are looking to bounce back from the economic slowdown brought on by downward pressure, which took a toll on bilateral trade between China and South Korea over the past few years. According to the Korea International Trade Association, the first 3 months of this saw exports from South Korea to China falling below 20% of the total for the first time since 2005. But despite such headwinds, both countries vowed to continue to strengthen its partnership.
Currently, bilateral trade has encountered some difficulties. However, the economic and trade cooperation between the two countries remains strong, with great potential and a close bond. We have the confidence and determination to propel bilateral economic and trade ties towards new and greater development.
Previous CIIEs have seen major South Korean conglomerates like Hyundai Motors, beauty firm Amore Pacific, and food manufacturing company Pulmuon exhibiting their cutting-edge technologies and high-quality products. With the anticipation of a pickup in trade in the air, more firms are expected to showcase their products and services to buyers at this year's expo, no doubt with the hopes of expanding their reach to the Chinese market and the rest of the world.
Numerous local Chinese brands are actively developing their own commercial washing machines, responding to the high demand for high-quality products from Chinese consumers. LG is also focused on elevating its offerings in this market.
A significant number of South Korean companies have reportedly struck deals in advance ahead of the upcoming CIIE in November. Hopes are high that the upcoming expo will spark fresh momentum and revive bilateral trade between China and South Korea amidst its shifting trade patterns and global supply chain restructuring. Yu Su-min, CGTN, Seoul.
And still to come here on Global Business. We head to Europe, where EU leaders have gathered for a summit. And Eurozone inflation falls for a third straight month off the backs of easing food and fuel prices.
From the 1,035-kilometer railway linking China to Laos, facilitating connectivity and boosting economic growth in the landlocked Southeast Asian country, to the joint China-Saudi Arabia photovoltaic project to harness renewable energy in the oil-dependent kingdom. The Belt and Road Initiative has come a long way since it was first proposed in 2013, complementing the development strategies of partner countries and building on their existing strength. The Belt and Road Initiative, linking the world in the pursuit of common prosperity for humanity.
To Europe now, where European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde cautioned this week that inflation was proving to be more persistent than anticipated. Meanwhile, the discussions of European Union leaders, which began on Thursday, are ongoing. Mark Webster joins us live now from Brussels with an update. Mark, so what's the latest from the EU summit?
Well, they've agreed some measures today. Not everything was agreed, including the issue over migration, which remains a very thorny issue. But they have agreed that they will give utter support, total support and commitment to Ukraine. And I think very interesting, for the first time ever, they've come up with a protocol for future relationships between the EU and China. Now, particularly on the issue of trade, they say they want to reset things for a more level playing field. Now, one EU insider told me that this document, this protocol, is meant to be pragmatic, balanced and positive. They value the relationship enormously between the EU and China, want to continue that on critical issues like climate change, but at the same time they're worried that they may be over-dependent on supplies of key components like silicon chips with Chinese industry. So they're asking European industry maybe to step up to the plate and do more so that in the event of global disruption of the supply chain, they wouldn't find themselves in real difficulty. And European industry wouldn't be starved of those key components. Now, the thinking behind this was put to us by Leo Varadkar, who's the Irish Prime Minister. Now, he said that before fighting started in Ukraine, that the EU had been pretty naive, he said, about the consistency of gas supplies from Russia. When that fighting started and then the EU decided to cut dramatically its supplies of energy, particularly gas from Russia, it left it in real difficulties. It was hugely disruptive to the European economy. So they say that with this protocol, while maintaining extremely positive and growing relations with China, they still want to encourage greater self-sufficiency in these key areas. So if there is global disruption, as I say, of the supply chain, they won't get caught out again.
Mark, I want to turn to monetary policy. Has the European Central Bank made any decisions about interest rates, and have they offered any solutions to address the current concerns about European inflation?
Well, you make a very interesting point. You've already said on the positive side, inflation is down in the Eurozone from 6.1 to 5.5% in the last month, and from over 10% in the latter part of last year. Now, what Christine Lagarde, the boss of the Central European Bank, has said is that there will be a further tightening of monetary policy. Just get ready for that. She's talking about perhaps another 25 basis points. That's a 0.25% increase in interest rates next month. Another 25 basis points, or another 0.25% in September. Because what they're worried about is that this, as you've alluded to, this hardening of the inflation rate, they want to make sure they get it much, much closer to the target rate of 2%. And apart from energy prices, which are falling, European consumers are seeing a marked increase in the cost of the products they're buying in their supermarkets every day. Now, that is what, as I say, is worrying the European Central Bank. So there are going to be more increases in interest rates, there's no doubt, probably in the range of 0.5% before the end of the year. But the European Central Bank is hawkish on this, and they're going to come back, and if further tightening of monetary policy is necessary, Christine Lagarde made it absolutely clear they will not hesitate to do that.
All right, many thanks for that report. Mark Webster for us in Brussels. Thank you. Meanwhile, record high food prices in Europe are threatening to spoil consumer appetites. Governments have been coming down hard on retailers feared to be pocketing inflated profits amid price surges. 75 of France's top food companies have pledged to lower prices on an array of items. Our Natalie Malchas has more.
As people struggle to cope with the cost of living, making savings in the supermarket is now a necessity for many. But prices that were quick to rise have been much slower to fall, despite costs coming down.
For months, retailers here say food items were priced to keep up with energy costs, wages and commodities that soared after the COVID pandemic and the war in Ukraine. Record high food price inflation surged to about 16% in March.
In May, it cooled marginally to 14%. French lawmakers have been aggressive in trying to bring prices down, forcing retailers to reflect cheaper raw material costs in supermarket aisles. For many, the savings couldn't come soon enough.
I'm not taking the basket, so I prefer to take all things in my hand, so I don't buy much things. Yeah, and I'm choosing the cheapest one.
Je n'ai pas de stratégie lorsque je rentre dans un supermarché.
I don't really have a strategy for going to the supermarkets. I just try to spend as much as I used to, This often means I need to buy less. It's hard now. We need to compare prices. We need to be careful. There's definitely fewer products in my basket now. But I don't think companies want to bring the prices down. Keeping the prices up is a good thing for them.
In June, the French government convinced 75 food companies to cut prices of dozens of items amid early signs of a decrease in raw material costs.
For much of the second half of the year, it is only that period where we'll start to see food prices moderating. It is quite clear why there's been such a lag between the retailer as well as what we're seeing in the farm level for the past 5 months, because global agricultural prices started softening aggressively towards the end of the year.
Consumers are expected to see price cuts of between 2 and 10% from July.
If you look at anything in the cereals basket related to grain, we think that that is going to decline in a coming months. That will be a lead. Secondly, anything that is on vegetable oil related products, we'll likely see those prices declining. Fruits and vegetables are also going to decline. We're not as positive about meat products because across the world today, we have what we call the avian influenza that is negatively affecting poultry farming in Brazil, in Europe, in South Africa, in Australia. It's the same thing in the egg prices. So that is going to be upside pressure on those prices. And the same is true for sugar prices because in South America today, the sugar fields are not in good shape.
Protecting consumers from exorbitant food costs is a priority for European governments. In the UK, supermarket executives were hauled before Parliament monitoring food and fuel prices, while Hungary has imposed mandatory price caps on some food essentials. Natalie Malchas, CGTN, Paris.
The citrus industry in South Africa is scrambling to ensure this year's harvest doesn't go to waste. The bulk of the country's citrus produce is usually exported to Europe. However, as our Sumitra Naidu reports, exporters may have a difficult time this year.
South Africa has been in negotiations with the EU for months, but there's been little progress in finding common ground. The EU argues that the regulations were imposed to prevent any diseased fruit from entering the region.
The new EU regulations, only on oranges, it's totally unjustified. It's definitely a witch hunt against South African oranges. We did not have one false codling moth interception in Europe, and yet they still carried on and introduced new measures this year, which are draconian and will impact our ability to export oranges into the EU in the 2023 season. And it's a time when the EU is crying out for oranges.
South Africa is known for producing high-quality fruit that's often exported to various countries across the world.
A couple of years back we had a challenge with quality, but that has improved a lot with the citrus, especially in the last, say, 5 years. The citrus has improved a lot.
In 2022, South Africa exported over 400,000 tons of oranges to Europe. However, European retailers may not get their stock this year if no agreement is reached. The supply shortage is already pushing up prices on what's available.
Spain was out of the market very early, as were Greece and Italy. And so at the moment, the orange prices that the poor consumer has to pay in the European Union are way above level that they've ever been in the past. So it's really unnecessary to bring these measures in, and it's politically motivated and protectionist from the EU.
The EU regulatory delay is adding to the pressures being felt by local farmers. Many have been trying to recover after COVID and were pinning their hopes on this year's harvest.
The Bureau of Food and Agriculture Policy shows that 4 out of 5 citrus farmers made a loss last year, and obviously that's not sustainable. The challenges were mostly around freight rates, in other words, the cost of shipping fruit into the market. They doubled into many markets, and they're 30 to 40% of our cost chain. So as a result, there just was no return back to the farmer.
South Africa has lodged a complaint with the World Trade Organization. In the meantime, the citrus industry is moving forward into new export markets. Experts say this will be more fruitful as Europe could refuse to budge. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
And that will do it for this edition of Global Business here on CGTN. I'm Michael Wong here in Beijing. We'll see you again next time.